Welcome to the Matt and Matt podcast, hosted by Matt and Matt.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Finally back. It's the Matt and Matt podcast. I know. I hear you. I know. No, I know. No one really asked for us to come back, but we're back anyway.
We asked ourselves, so
we asked ourselves,
the call, and we're back.
We avoided coming back as long as possible. But unfortunately, we are back live. Only in our recording of this podcast is it live. But it is February 29th. Happy Leap Day to everybody. We're joined, as always, by Matthew Cabrera. Matthew? Don't just repeat what I'm saying. Don't.
Sorry. Yes, of course. I'm under the weather. Actually.
Well, we're all under the weather unless you're in space. So, also, we are joined by our super secret special guest, William Nogue.
Hi.
Just as excited as ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Let's get the show on the road.
as depressed as we sound, we actually should be a lot happier because the Washington Capitals are absolutely dominating the NHL. They have had a historic start to the season, although it's I find it odd to call it a start considering they're 61 games into the season. They currently have 94 points in 61 games.
All of the points.
Only 12 regulation losses. 16 total losses in the first 61 games. That is a stupid amount of wins.
It's stupid.
Now, I want to hear from William first. Just talk about the Caps start,
I know, I
guess.
feel the same way, Matt. I'm speechless, too.
I am too.
Well, as you mentioned, the Caps have kind of jumped out to a pretty insane start, I guess, to the season. But let's just put some things in perspective. The Caps currently sit with a plus 60 goal differential. So they've scored 60 more goals than they've allowed, which is astonishing, especially that they're able to sustain that rate of scoring with the fact that most of their recent games have been one-goal games. So it's almost simply the fact that they keep winning that they're able to sustain that. They're 16 points up on the Rangers for the Metro with one game in hand on them. They're 16 up on Florida / the Rangers for the Eastern Conference with a game in hand on both of them. And the most astonishing thing to me is that they're 11 points up on Chicago, and that includes the loss last night with 3 games still in hand on Chicago. So they could be as high as 17 points up on Chicago if they won all 3 of those games, which is entirely possible. So that's unbelievable to me. And the fact that the percentages that are being predicted for the Caps to win the President's Trophy, it's something like 96% sure that the Capitals would win it, maybe even higher at this point. But they're off to an incredible start, and I think that we are privileged to be watching the greatest Washington Capitals team that we've ever seen.
I agree with that. In fact, there was a very well-written article in the Washington Post about how talking to all the skeptics of the Washington Capitals, telling them to essentially put aside their playoff disappointment and their unwillingness to become emotionally connected to this team and just enjoy one of the greatest, if not the greatest, regular season performance of all time, at least post 70s when they started adding overtime loss points or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to put aside, just stop worrying about the playoffs until the playoffs come. Don't just discount this team because you don't want to be upset in the playoffs.
Which I think the Capitals have done, and you can see that kind of in how they're playing and how they've been able to sustain play.
Mm-hmm.
And just from what the players are talking about, I mean, it seems like everybody's really focused, and maybe even the fan base. I mean, it's impossible not to talk about it a little bit, but there's no extensive, looking at, who are we going to play in the playoffs, even though I have to admit that I've definitely glanced at it a couple of times, but it's just get through the regular season, see how good this Caps team can really be. And when we get there, and I feel like everybody's got a feeling that this team's got it has another gear that it can take it up to for the playoffs, and we're all eager to see what that is.
Mm-hmm. Waiting on Cabrera to jump in here, but...
Cabrera's dead. He's been dead for exactly 7 minutes, and there's really no hope for us to get him back.
Okay, so anyway, what I was going to say was that Washington Post article I felt like was more of an open letter to the fans than talking about the Caps team worrying about the playoffs. But again, I still think it holds very true to where there is this group or subset of Caps fans that is just not allowing themselves to enjoy any of the regular season because they're all like, oh, just wait till you prove it in the postseason.
Yeah,
I mean, historically... you'll look back as a Caps fan on this team, on their playoff success, but I think in another historical context, they will be a team that other teams look at as one of... They are right now what every team in the NHL wants to be. And that is something that we should be proud of as Caps fans, and it's just a blast to watch them every night. Even in like a 3-2 loss to Chicago last night.
Well, and I don't think you can say that was really a blast to watch, but it was. You could see that they are capable of that, and it's just I didn't really care too much about that loss, to be honest with you, and I think that part of that is the real reason that we're here, and that's the trade bonanza that's going on around the league, and I'm just kind of waiting for the dust to settle. I think the Chicago has made all of their moves, and they've got their new assets, and obviously it was a litmus test for them to play the Capitals, and the Capitals are still, I think, just letting the dust settle a little bit, and then they'll come back out and get things firing again. I think they're going through a little bit of a slump here in the last couple games, but they're on their way back up.
And you know what? There's because Cabrera, are you even here right now?
Cabrera said that he's getting laundry.
Okay, so while Cabrera's getting laundry, I actually thought that we could segue from talking about the Caps to talking about last night to talking about the trade deadline because, as you said before, Blackhawks made a levy? I think levy is the right word. They made a lot of trades, and they've picked up a ton of assets. I believe a line and a third worth of forwards and an entire line of defensemen. Meanwhile, the Caps did play that game down a huge person in John Carlson, which I think should be noted. Also, I was thinking about this, how last season, I mean, you can look at another 3-2 game that was a primetime game where the Caps played the Blackhawks at National Stadium. They ended up winning that one 3-2, but, I mean, that doesn't define the Blackhawks for sure. They ended up going on to win the Stanley Cup, and, I mean... Obviously, different circumstances here, and you can't just base an entire season off of one game. But I think that for Caps fans or for hockey fans, this game doesn't define either team. Well, I think it defines them both as two of the best teams. I watched that game and thought that was the closest thing to playoff hockey we will see until maybe the last week of the regular season.
I can definitely agree that at least if you combine parts of each of the games. I think that the second period was a little bit rough for the Capitals.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It was definitely one-sided, then another-sided. Then the third period was fairly even. A couple bounces, arguable missed calls. But, I mean, you could also say the same thing about the Winter Classic, where the Caps jumped out in the first 2-0. Then in the second period, they come back, and then quote-unquote questionable calls give the Caps a power play, late goal for the Caps to win it. I mean... It's just the way that the game goes, but I think that, for me at least, that game was a nice way to kind of to re-evaluate the Capitals, just to kind of look at them again as the juggernaut that they are. Because their previous couple of performances, you saw a couple of glaring mistakes, a lack of the ability to jump out to an early lead. So I think they kind of did a good job of correcting a lot of their mistakes, a lot less penalties. But I mean, by the end of it, they put forth a pretty solid effort.
I agree. Well, I think it's time for us to transition a little bit into the to trade watch.
Yeah, now that Cabrera's finally back with us, we can actually start talking about the trade deadline.
Yes, forgive me, friends. I had to do my laundry. clean a few things up with myself and my clothes.
I think you need to clean up your attitude.
So, you know what happened is Cabrera woke up this morning and he saw that the Penguins have traded Sergei Plotnikov to the Coyotes for Matthias Plachta and a 2017 7th-round pick, and he literally shit his pants right there.
Yes. Yep, I did.
I have to say, Mr. Cabrera did send me a Snapchat earlier of him presumably on a toilet saying, I think I shit my pants.
It's actually, it was the past tense. It was shat.
Oh, my apologies. I don't mean to spread misinformation on the internet.
Get with it now, please.
So anyway, we've got the trade deadline now. Now, I think we just finished talking about the Blackhawks, Cabrera. We talked about the Blackhawks game yesterday. I talked about how I thought it was great to see the Caps correct a lot of the mistakes they had made in previous.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
Very well. I also said, as you may have seen on Twitter, follow me at Demand2413. That
avoid him at all costs.
I mentioned this on Twitter that I think that was the closest thing to playoff hockey that we'll see for a very long time, like at least until the last season or week or two of the regular season.
Yes.
It was very high intensity, very well played by both teams. Chicago ended up edging us out, but I thought it was good for both teams to kind of see that they're able to play at that level at this point in the season.
Definitely.
So anyway, we're going to move on to the trade deadline now. And obviously, we're going to start with the Caps, I think, because that's what we're all really here for, at least us three. So we'll talk about them first, and then maybe we'll dip into some other things like the Stahl acquisition and whatnot.
Yes, and it's Metropolitan Division, so I think it's pretty important.
Well, it's NHL, so shut up. So we're going to start with Brooks Lake being moved, along with Chris Brown, if I'm not mistaken. No, was it Connor Carrick?
Connor Carrick was moved in the Brooks-like deal, but Chris Brown was moved for one of the Bork brothers. Ryan.
That's right. So we've lost half of our Brookses, but we've gained double the Borks.
True.
Yes.
So we are first. Let's look at the Bork trade really quick. An AHL acquisition, but it's Chris Bork is who we picked up or who we already have? I'm sorry.
Chris Bork is who we have. We traded Chris Brown for Ryan Bork. I mean, obviously think that we should probably not spend too much time on this one. This one is two players that essentially have the exact same salary, but Chris Brown has been scratched for some games with Hershey, and he's not really producing a lot. And I really can't make much more of this other than the fact that we have one of the Bork brothers to play with his brother, and Ryan Bork is a decent player.
And Chris Bork's been the leading scorer for Hershey, so I mean,
there you go.
So
yippee-ki-yay.
All right, but
it's a trade.
Yeah, and then let's move on to the biggest one the Caps have made so far. Keep in mind the trade deadline has not been reached yet. I believe there's still 2 hours before that happens. But
yes.
So the Caps could still make a trade while we're live on the podcast. But the big trade, long-tenured capital, Brooks Lake, traded alongside Connor Carrick and a second-round 2016 pick for received Daniel Winnick, as well as a seventh-round 5th-round 2016 pick?
Round.
This is all off the top of my head. I didn't have time to do them.
I'm really impressed.
Thank you. 2016 pick. So when I first look at this trade, I loved it. I hate losing Brooks Lake, obviously, as a Caps fan. But from a hockey standpoint, I think it's a great trade. Cabrera, why don't you go first?
From a business standpoint, no, I think it's a win for the Caps. Certainly in the short term, and maybe even the long term. But of course, we're more focused on the short term, as GMBM said in his press conference. I don't know, what was it, 2 or 3 days ago?
Correct.
The window is either this year or next year to win a cup. And Daniel Winnick is half as much money total, and he has an extra year on his contract as opposed to Brooks Lake, who, Matt, you already touched on it a little. Great guy, great player too. Well, fourth line, so, good for the fourth line. This year, of course, he had some struggles producing. He's had injury problems also. Mm-hmm. But just as a person, I think he's a really good guy. So from an emotional standpoint, it's certainly a tough move. But I think giving away, if we look at the other pieces, of the trade. Connor Carrick, I think, is a pretty decent deal. Will and I talked about this a little earlier because obviously he's a prospect, but Madison Bowie is probably the crown jewel of the whole defensive system.
The AHL core down there in Hershey.
Yes, so I think it's not as big of a loss as it might seem to be. So on the other side, getting up the draft.
Sorry,
that's nice. And Daniel Winnick too. He seems like a pretty good producer.
Very similar to Brooks Lake, I think.
Well, and what I'd jump in on that. I mean, looking at Winnick, he's a guy who I think I saw somewhere that he finished like in 2013. He was like 26th in Selke Trophy voting or something like that. So he's somebody who's noted for being a defensive forward. Not really a producer. I don't think you can really kid yourself in saying that he's anything other than a fourth line winger. But for what it's worth, that's what we were shopping for, and we trade away Brooks Lake and mostly just his contract. And the reason that we had to get rid of Connor Carrick in addition to that second-round pick is because we were convincing Toronto to take on
the entire contract
of Brooks Lake and freeing up 2.2 for us for breathing room for the rest of the day. But more and more, I mean, I'm seeing tweets from Mike Vogel and his opinion on whether or not he sees Caps making any other moves tonight that will be significant. And people like Louis Eriksson or John Michael Lyles, Dan Hamhuis don't seem to be in the cards for the Capitals. It'll be a shock if one of them develops. At this point, it looks like it's more so having some free space so that when Carlson comes back, there's no contract issues there. And then additionally, if things don't go 100% golden for the Capitals this year, we're not like the Blackhawks where we have to just sell everybody off and start from the bottom up next year. We have a little bit of space for the next summer if we need to move some pieces around. So
yeah.
There's wiggle room.
Yeah, there is. Well, and I was talking to Cabrera about this offline, and looking at the Capitals lineup. So you've got now Ovechkin, Backstrom, and Oshie as your first line, and I think that's pretty solid. And you've got Burakovsky, Kuznetsov, and Williams, and I was telling Cabrera, if you move Burakovsky down, I think that he really suffers. So you keep him on the second line, he'll develop even more than he has into a higher scorer. Kuznetsov, obviously, first liner anywhere else, and outstanding talent. Williams, great producer, really good to have on that second line. Then you've got your third line, which I'm not as sold on right now, of Johansson, Chimera, and Wilson, presumably, although I can see Wilson getting dropped to the fourth line role.
I could see Beagle popping up there.
And that's what I was thinking, perhaps having Beagle, so you've got two really good centermen on that third line.
Yep.
And then you've got Winnick, Richards, and then some combination of Wilson, Latta, whoever else you throw in there, and it's a lot of experience on that fourth line. Good defensive forward, good face-off man in Richards, and then a younger guy with some energy. So, I mean, there's definitely some shuffling to be done in those bottom two lines, but you've got the pieces there to have a really, really solid bottom half that can compete with other top forwards. They've got to have the speed, but they can do it.
Now, for people who haven't, who don't know too much about Daniel Winnick or the Brooks Lake Winnick trade, just to kind of quickly recap what that is, it's essentially Brooks Lake was getting paid about $4.2 million on his contract, and that is way too much for a fourth liner.
He has 1 goal and 7 points this year.
Yeah.
And he hasn't missed a game, I don't think. So we traded him away with an AHL player as well as what is essentially going to end up being a third-round pick, a very late second-rounder. We traded that away for a player very similar to Brooks Lake, but I've heard that he is faster than Brooks Lake and a bit bigger. Which
I've also heard that his numbers are somewhat diminished because he was playing with AHLers and also he was playing in Toronto.
Well, that's definitely possible, although in looking at his stats, I mean, he hasn't gone over 11 goals his entire career, and he's got a points high of 30 points in 13-14 with the Ducks, so, you know.
I mean, you're not looking at an amazing producer, but honestly,
He's a good bottom six forward.
In fact, I think I really like the sound of a fourth line of Mike. First off, I think Tom Wilson and Mike Richards could be really good together on a line. That's just like personality-wise, the way they play. It's very north-south. It's pretty quick. They like to get involved with the hitting.
I don't think Richards is that quick, but
Well, he's not that quick, but he kind of brings that attitude to a line.
Sort of a grinder.
Exactly.
I think kind of gets what you're saying.
He's kind of like a grinder / playmaker on that line. So you have Winnick, Richards, and Tom Wilson. I would love putting that fourth line out against like a big West Coast team like the LA Kings. Like I'd be really comfortable putting out that fourth line night after night in the playoffs. Much more than having Brooks Lake on that line with like Richards and Galiev or something. Even though Galiev has his place for sure, but
yes.
Yeah, so I think that kind of covers most of the Winnick basis. We'll see how that plays out. Obviously, he hasn't played any games for us yet. But on the surface, looks like a good move by GMBM, another solid hockey decision. Sad to see Brooks Lake go. Played a lot of really good years here. Really produced. Went through a lot of the bad times. Got to experience all of the highs that Washington's seen, other than trip to the Stanley Cup final. And now that leaves Ovechkin, the current NHL goal scoring leader, as the longest tenured Capitals player.
Yay.
well, definitely sucks to lose, like from a fan perspective, but
Yeah.
from a hockey perspective, it just makes too much sense not to do it.
I think it's not going to hit me 100% until I see Brooks Lake in a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey in about a week.
Really, really sad to see.
That would
Yeah.
kill me.
Someone needs to call the fashion police.
He's playing with the Marlies and James Van Riemsdyk right now.
Yeah, I think that
And Mike Babcock.
and Mike Babcock might have to dress with the players they got in their lineup. Jeez.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Mike Green trade initially hit me a lot harder, but it kind of grew on me over the offseason because I had time. But like the leaving hasn't fully hit me yet. But like the second I see him in that Maple Leafs jersey, I'm just gonna be like, oh, I don't like this one bit.
Well,
I really wish I had the wah, wah, wah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
Great.
let's move on here. We have a little bit more time. William, you can go ahead and tell me when you need
what
to.
kind of updates we've had since we've been talking. It's now 1:03 on trade deadline day, and we've got nothing.
Actually, we have Chicago and Carolina swapping AHLers. Get a load of this, guys.
Big moves.
Dennis,
Woo, 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 woo.
Dennis Robertson
Uh-oh.
goes to the Hurricanes. In exchange for a goalie,
Whoa.
goes by the name of Drew McIntyre.
Where do you see this?
SB Nation on the NHL page.
Unbelievable. Okay, let's talk about the stall that has been traded from brother to brother.
I think that's hilarious, by the way. Can we just make that kind of a point that's he went to play on a team
With his brother.
with his brother, and then he leaves, but he plays on the team with his brother.
Man, that's going to make Thanksgiving awkward.
Yeah. Jordan's going to be on the other side of the room. Well,
Now I'm
This
the one
is
that's all
not
alone.
fun.
Well, the ironic thing about that is that it's not ironic, but Stahl actually, part of the reason that the Canes had to have such a rough deal there where they had to retain half of his salary is because Eric said, I'm not going to go anywhere but New York to play with Mark. So if you're going to trade me, you're trading me to New York and figure out a deal, and that's what they had to do.
Yeah.
So
And New York also,
there's
long term, obviously Eric Stahl is not the player he used to be, but
By far. He used to be one heck of a player, but he is really dipped production.
the Rangers really kind of, they sort of long term, 2 second-round picks this year's and next year's draft. And they've also given up a lot of draft picks in general. I think for the Martin St. Louis trade and the Rick Nash. I don't know.
long term, the Rangers are in trouble. They
Yes,
do not have the cap space to maintain this they've almost turned into the Florida Panthers with this like band of mercenaries they put together, and it's gonna bite them.
Yeah.
Although I think, honestly, right now,
too. He's not going to win a cup.
to be honest, I'm liking Florida more in the long term than New York right now.
I think Florida certainly has a lot more talented younger players.
They've got some young
They've
talent.
got guys like Ekblad, Barkov. I'm trying to think who else. I think Vinny Trocheck is on there too. They've got a lot of young talent that they can at least stay above water for a few more years than I think the Rangers can.
The Panthers have definitely rebuilt in a positive way, and they've moved away from, like I said, what the Rangers are doing now, and just hiring a bunch of rentals and trying to ride that magic. And now they're developing from within, and it's going to work out.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, the Blackhawks kind of do that too, but they actually and that's Stan Bowman's kind of smart at what he does.
The only time that pays off is when it works, obviously, and for them it has. And we'll see what happens this year because they've got Ladd and they've got Fleischman and Weiss, so they're essentially doing the same thing all over again. And you can be sure that no matter what happens at the end of this year, they're going to have to cut some weight. But if it gets them to the Cup final, at least you have to say it's worth it.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point. A lot of people saying that Brooks Lake trade could potentially really hurt the chemistry of the Capitals locker room. I disagree with that. I think they've got a veteran group of guys that can handle something like that. They understand business decisions. They understand the hockey decisions. They're willing to do anything to get to the Cup. But now, when you're thinking about making a lot of big moves, you've got two ends of the spectrum. One end where you've got something that's working, and you're thinking, I don't want to mess this up. Let's just keep it how it is. And you've got the opposite end. You've got the Chicago Blackhawks, who many times in recent years have gone out and brought in, like they've done this year, a lot of players, and they just have success. So, William, in your eyes, what is the better move for an NHL team that's in the middle 8 point, like a Boston, for example?
Well, I think that you've got to, and it starts from your GM, and honestly, to some degree, it has to have already happened. You have to have been smart with your drafting. You have to not make yourself completely void of draft picks. It's obviously a very fine balance, and it's definitely a little bit of luck. We see the Edmonton Oilers have gone one way, where they just get prospects, and that's gone terribly for them. They've had first round after first round after first round, not only first round, but first pick after first pick that just haven't worked out. But then you go to the opposite end of the spectrum with like I said, the Panthers, where they're just getting rentals and stuff like that. The thing with the Blackhawks is they have a core of guys like Hossa, Taves, and Kane who have just been there the entire time and are so solid that you fill in role players around them that just kind of fit in. Right, and the team functions well, and they've had good enough goaltending, which is another thing that you have to have. Got to have a good goaltender to back it up and steal a couple games for you. That is part of the winning formula for them. And then on the other side of it, you've got teams like LA, which I feel like you don't really have. Maybe you've got Kopitar, but they don't really have the super standouts, goal scoring machines. But they've got a lot of really solid second, third line players that can produce, and you've got a tough, big physical team to play against. So it's not one defined way to do it, but you've got to be shrewd, and you've got to know, you've got to look at underlying numbers, I think, to some degree, of the players that you're picking up and what they're really going to add to your team. And you've got to know when you've got a good thing and when you don't want to change it too much. And I think, to be honest with you, that's kind of what the Caps are doing right now. And they're saying, this is where we're at right now, and it's historically good, not only for our franchise, but for the freaking NHL history. Why change it? And it's tempting with the Blackhawks making all these moves and the Rangers and the Kings. They're adding really solid players, and you sit there and go, man, what's going to happen to us? But we'll definitely see over the next couple of weeks. The Caps have some big games coming up against a lot of these good teams, and with their healthy players hopefully coming back, and we'll see how Mike Weber works out in Karlsson's absence. a lot of things still to be decided about this Caps team, and I think that we're not really going to see the Caps playoff, team until we've got maybe 10 games left in the season, and they're just kind of like, all right, let's start getting it going here. Let's start getting in the groove.
Yeah, and that's also when we'll start seeing guys like Carlson get back from injury, and we'll start to get the full lineup back out there again.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
And I think to add on to what Will was saying about, I'm sure we talked about this, or you guys talked about it when I was doing my laundry.
Sure.
But just the way the Caps have played recently, the nice thing is that we have a cushion to work with.
One hell of a cushion.
And at that, a big cushion. So, it's okay to have a couple of these rusty games to work out the kinks at this point, against teams that maybe aren't necessarily playoff caliber. But, I don't know how many more teams we're going to play that aren't in the hunt for a playoff spot. But, I think it'll also give us sort of a good tune-up against teams that are really fighting for a playoff spot, that want to play hard, score goals, and come at you really quickly. So I think that's going to force the Caps, certainly towards the end of the season, to start picking up their play. Because, recently we saw the struggle with not being able to score first, some defensive miscues, passes just not being as crisp, not out on the money. It's just been like a little off. It hasn't been the sweet spot just yet. So I think it's nice being able to have that cushion, but it's also, in my opinion, only a matter of time before they really start to, kind of pick up their play.
Start playing like they were at the beginning of the season, and with that same pop in their game.
What we really need to do to see that, and I really hope it happens tomorrow, because if they can do it against Pittsburgh, it'd be great. If they win the game like 5-1, 5-2, that's when you think, okay, maybe it's starting to come back. And then they play Toronto. They play the Marlies on Wednesday. So, hopefully that can carry whatever momentum they get from Pittsburgh. Or, worst case scenario, you lose to Pittsburgh by another close game. You better come out on Wednesday and absolutely run over the Maple Leafs.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the other thing is that, with these sort of comebacks that we have to do, it seems like, a lot like 09-10, where, we're kind of off our game for 50 minutes, and then, the last 10 minutes of the game, everything starts to pick up, like, oh, wait, actually have to check
we have to play hockey now.
We're down. We got to get going.
It's 4-0. We need to start scoring.
Yeah.
Final score 4-3.
I'm not a big fan of the comeback, having to use that as a crutch every time. It's nice, certainly, to have that in the bank, but it isn't something that we need to use every time. And I'm sure the players know that. Nick Backstrom was talking about it the other day, about having to come back all the time. So I think the players know. It's just, and OV said it, I think, also a couple days ago, that it's kind of like human nature to, maybe just sort of, that there are mistakes to be corrected, but it's hard to do that when you have such a big cushion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, so I don't know. I certainly hope they'll work out the kinks. I'd imagine they would, especially the season kind of not really coming to a close, but, we're starting to get to that point where the playoffs are coming up. It's got to be at least in the back of your mind, and you got to start, moving the legs a little quicker. Everything's just got to be fast. Like, you got to be ahead of the curve. You can't sort of ride the wave.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and we'll definitely see some serious tests over the next. In fact, next 10 games, you've got 8 teams that are potential playoff people there.
People, that's right. Not teams, people.
So, also, with that, we bid William adieu. We had a bit of a cutoff there. I'm sure it was a seamless transition from an editing standpoint, but William did have to leave us.
Kind of surprised you didn't win an Oscar last night.
Yeah, Leo barely beat me out.
No, I was talking about best editing, not best actor.
No, well, I also would have won best actor. I'm a pretty damn good actor.
Right. Keep telling yourself that. I'm going to blow my nose.
But I think William said something earlier that I actually kind of want to talk about for the last little bit of this podcast here. This has been a very Caps-heavy podcast.
It sure has.
As it will be. If you're someone who has never listened to the podcast before, This is a very Washington sports-heavy podcast. I mean, we will start if we keep doing these, which hopefully we can start to kind of get a
Famous
little
last words.
Yeah.
Since like 1963.
bit. We've tried to revamp this podcast a lot of times, but I think this was a good time to bring it back. I didn't want to wait till the playoffs to start this, and
Of course.
I think
I
we should. I'm really excited to maybe do some playoff ones this year.
Yes, definitely.
So we'll do that. But I think for right now, it has been a very Caps-heavy podcast. So I think we should close it out talking about the Caps' future now, and we'll have time to talk about this in more depth later. And this is obviously just me off the cuff asking you this, but William was talking about how teams like the Blackhawks, we've seen they win a cup with a lot of players. They end up having to clean up shop, but they still have that core of guys. Now, with the Capitals saying that their window is closing 2 years, you've got this year, you got next year, then that third year, that's when things kind of shake up a bit.
Right.
I look at the Caps right now, and I see a potential Chicago situation where you've got, I think the formula maybe you get three skill forwards that are solid and will produce. You've got a defenseman and you've got a goalie. Well, we know for sure we've got a goalie.
Absolutely.
Braden Holtby. We've already got Niskanen and Orpik locked down. If you can find a way to keep John Carlson, I think he could be your Brent Seabrook type of guy that you hold on to. And then you've got your three forwards, I would say, for the Caps, and I think you'd agree with me. It's Ovi for sure, obviously. It's Backstrom, and it's Kuznetsov.
Yep. I think we have a good core that we've kind of settled around.
As well as some solid depth, I think, with young
absolutely.
guys.
I think, even though we're set kind of for this year and next year to go all in, I think you look beyond, third, fourth, however many years down the line. Down the line.
Down the line.
Down the line. Fair ball. In the corner. I like you said, I like the core that we have. Ovechkin, Backstrom. I don't know about TJ Oshie. I don't know. I mean, he's a nice player to have, certainly for at least a little bit of the stretch, but I don't know if we would necessarily build around him.
I don't think so. He's had a rough stretch as of late. Started out fairly well. And I mean,
doesn't like shooting the puck within the past couple.
Still, I still take him over Troy Brouwer.
I would too. He's younger, and can't go wrong with youth in a lot of ways. But I think maybe we could build around him, but not around him, but with him.
Yeah.
And then you look at farther down, younger guys. You've got Kuznetsov, Burakovsky. Even I think he's definitely someone we should try to retain as much as possible.
You've got Joe Hansen.
Yeah, Marcus Johansson. He's also, there are a lot of guys. I think, maybe the tradable piece, possibly TJ Oshie, once Burakovsky starts to kind of come into his own. I can certainly see him as a first liner.
Wow.
Kind of next to that Ovechkin, Backstrom, and Burakovsky. I mean, can you imagine Burakovsky at his prime playing in that line? Obviously Ovechkin will be a little older. Backstrom still producing at a torrid pace. I think it'd be quite a lethal first line.
What's really interesting to think about? I believe I think it's Burakovsky who in his early Canadian juniors days played on a line with Connor McDavid, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, I do recall that.
And I think right now he's not obviously skill wise where Connor McDavid is right now.
Right.
But he's got the ability to at least get close to that. I could see him career wise topping out, maybe hitting 30.
Yes. No, I think so. I think he's certainly he's got the potential to be, like I said, a first liner. Maybe not elite, but certainly can run with the big boys in the top three. I like. We saw, even though he struggled at the beginning with his sophomore slump, he really started to produce. And what he went like 16 points in 16 games or something like that. I can't remember, but it was some ridiculous pace.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, if we could keep that, if we can retain that. I mean, I think it's also important that he has kind of a stable growth. He's kind of around the same core because there certainly have been guys. I think maybe Michael Del Zotto could be one of them to use sort of as an example. But he started in New York, was supposed to be the prodigal son, but then he went to Philadelphia because he wasn't as good, and now he's he's a top defenseman at Philly, but he could have been better, I think. So I think it's important to have a sort of a stable upbringing.
And I think that's also going to be important for Brooks, for Dmitry Orlov.
Yes.
And I think that the fact that we have Niskanen and Orpik locked down for as long as we do, having those guys will actually help Orlov a lot, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? I think more and more I think about those big contracts that we gave them. As big as they were and as scary as they were on the surface, and they're still not like amazing contracts, but like GMBM, who is, by the way, for people who don't know, that means the Capitals general manager Brian McClellan. So GM general manager BM Brian McClellan.
Yes.
When GMBM made those moves, I think he definitely took into consideration using them to build up their younger core guys as they came up, to have some sort of stability in the defensive end and really have guys not only to produce for your team, but to help your team for the future.
Yeah. No, and the defensive core, like I kind of like what you said. I talked a lot about offense, but defensively, even though Brooks Orpik is old, he certainly is a tremendous locker room presence, and I kind of said that from the beginning. I don't know if Christian Ehrhoff would have had that. He might have been a better player because he was younger.
Uh-huh.
But I think locker room presence is certainly an overlooked point of view, I guess I'll call it.
From the average fan, for sure.
Yeah, and there also has to be chemistry to a team. There has to be good chemistry to a team.
That thing that the fans don't look at is probably one of the bigger losses of that Brooks Lake deal, honestly.
Yeah, that's huge too. I mean, he was a big time,
locker room guy.
He was with the Caps he's the longest tenured DC.
Yeah, he was
athlete.
the only guy that Ovechkin played with every single year.
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of stuff is huge. So that's why I think the Brooks Orpik pickup was a big deal, a bigger deal than what people might think it is because of the contract or something like that. If you look at it from just a talent and a playing standpoint, it's pretty god awful. But I like the idea of having him in the locker room and maybe using him as like a top 6 defenseman.
Yeah.
Chewing up minutes that gives Carlson a rest.
Mm-hmm.
But on the defensive side, also you have, like I said, Carlson, Niskanen, and Alzner. Those guys have been consistent and rock solid, and certainly are pieces for the future. That's a big deal. And then of course Braden Holtby at the back end.
And
I think people think we're set.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing I think is probably offensively, because obviously it's more players, but offensively, I think that takes a lot more tinkering than defense. So I think it'll be important to keep an eye on the offense. Defensively, I think we're certainly more set for the future than we are offensively.
And to kind of cap it off here, I'm just going to throw a bold, just a kind of out there prediction.
Right.
Thinking about players and what they're worth and all this nonsense. I think when the Caps are looking to make room, I haven't looked at whose contracts expire when or whatever, but some moves that I could see happening, potentially. I could see maybe moving Johansson. Maybe,
yes.
I think the Capitals would be willing to let go of Carlson before they let go of Alzner. And I could possibly see Grubauer leaving. because of Samsonov being drafted
Yes.
this year coming up for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, Grubauer would be a good trade bait, maybe for prospects or something like that.
Now, I mean, that's not to say that we don't want any of those. We don't want any of those players. Obviously,
Correct.
I love having them on the team. What they're doing now is historically good. So
That's
I think from a Caps fan standpoint, at this point, it's just sit back, enjoy the ride, and get excited for the playoffs. You got to make sure
Yeah.
Verizon Center's rocking because when enemies enter the phone booth, they got to know that game is the Capitals to lose.
Yep. And I'm excited.
I'm gonna say it right now. Knock on wood. If the Caps make the Stanley Cup final, the Verizon Center will be one of the top 5 loudest NHL arenas in the last 10 years for a playoff series.
Absolutely. I think
Because DC fans are ready to freaking explode. It's gonna be like I'm going to predict it's gonna be the same level as the Toronto Blue Jays in the MLB playoffs last year.
yeah. And think about it. DC as a sports town in general,
It's a fantastic
had-
sports town.
it really is.
It's got a similar passion for their teams as a Philadelphia. Now we're not as vocally disappointed in our sports teams. I mean, we've had a little bit more success than Philly sports teams, so we haven't had to riot. Except for like the Phillies, they won recently. But anyway,
Yes. But, they're going to be just horrible for
oh,
the
they're a done deal. But
next couple of
John Cruiser must be terrified.
John Cruiser is rolling over in his soon to be maybe like 80 years from now
in
grave.
his Penn dorm room.
That's right.
But yeah, I think we'll end it there. That was a big Caps podcast. Unfortunately, the only other sport going on right now is basketball. Wizards. I mean, I know you don't follow basketball, but
I don't follow basketball. As a matter of fact, I'm not a big fan of the NBA in general.
well, that's fine. I don't care. So,
Okay.
just a quick update for anyone interested. Wizards are a couple games out of a playoff spot right now. They had a rough start, but post All-Star break, they have one of the easier schedules after having one of the hardest schedules to start, and could potentially be looking at sneaking in. John Wall's been doing really well. A lot more turnovers, but I think that he's had a real lack of talent this year. And I could see next year being a big explosion for the DC basketball market because I see a big name free agent coming to DC, whether that be Kevin Durant or like a Carmelo Anthony, maybe even like a Rudy Gay. There's gonna be someone big coming to DC next year, so get excited for that.
What about Randy Whitman? I hear people are not big fans of him.
I think he's getting thrown a bit under the bus because the talent level has dropped off significantly.
I see.
There's been a lot of injury. Beal hasn't been very healthy, which has been really tough for them. I think he's on. Someone said he's on a career minutes limit now. I think it's just a season limit, but if it is a career minutes limit, that's rough.
Yeah, that is rough. Because you got to tell somebody, hey, once you hit this amount of minutes, you're done. Right off into the sunset.
That's the definition of a minutes limit. Thank you. I think we'll end it there. Thank you for joining us for our first podcast of 2016.
3 months basically in.
I hope you all enjoy this. Hopefully this goes up by tomorrow. Because I'm probably going to...
That's a relative term because...
probably put it up on the TubeYube. Otherwise known to the kids as YouTube.
Maybe share with...
Should we do Should we do thank yous or a shout outs?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do shout outs.
Let me find. I need to
cue the music.
cue the music. I need to find the music.
Find it now.
Okay. Let's see. It's TSN something. This portion of the podcast is just going to be me looking up stuff on YouTube. Dun 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 dun. Dun, dun,
But
dun, dun,
I'm trying to think
dun.
of stuff to say about the Caps, but there really isn't. Okay, here we go. We got a big trade. Colorado Avalanche.
It's no surprise a
Dang it.
5-point performance.
Colorado
The
Avalanche
amount of it-
had Mikkel Bodker from Arizona. The Coyotes, get a load of this. They get Alex Tangay,
Huh.
Connor Bleakley, not sure who he is, and Kyle Wood, also unsure of who he is. But I know Alex Tanguay. I think he won a cup with Colorado back in the 1800s. And, Mikael Boedker was a big target.
I think Eisenhower was in office when Tanguay won his last cup.
Yeah, that's right.
I think when they visited the White House, the president said, "Tear down this wall."
Yeah. Let's see. Mikael Boedker's 26 years old.
Wow, what a pickup.
Yeah.
Someone keep a counter for Cabrera, by the way.
Yeah.
Over the last 12 seconds, he said it at least 25 times. This is an excellent job of us killing time, by the way.
It sure is. Well, thank God for, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here. Take this one to the hashtag the bank, even though I said the twice.
The hashtag the bank.
I'm pretty sure the Avalanche did this deal, and the Avalanche in Arizona pulled this deal off because they knew that we needed to kill some time. So they just put their organization on the line and traded big-time names and big-time deadline deals.
You know what?
So,
I've got a good quick thing for killing time. Why don't we talk about really quick spring training? Just got underway with baseball workouts for pitchers, catchers, and fielders.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Now, for the Washington Nationals, we've got an interesting situation where you've got Papelbon still there, and it appears that for right now has been squashed, that whole deal. I think that the city of Washington will be behind the Nationals if they win. If Papelbon comes out with heat and he's getting people out, people will get behind him.
Yeah, I think it's like, love him or love to hate him this year. We're all in or we're all out.
And
I think if Papelbon fails to, do good things, he is going to get railed. I mean, absolutely railed. So I think there's a lot to.
Mike Rizzo's definitely on the hot seat this year, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's definitely one of the hottest seats in the league.
Yeah.
Honestly, the more I read on Dusty Baker, the more he reminds me of Barry Trotz hire. So I actually do like that, though.
I like the stuff he has to say.
When he first came over, I didn't do much research on him. I was iffy because there didn't seem to be too many managers out there at all.
Yeah.
That were high quality and willing to work with us. And the thing that really sucks is that 2 or 3 years ago, when we did hire Matt Williams, we had one of the most intriguing jobs in the MLB. Now no one wants to come near us.
Yeah.
And it's if the players start playing again, if we get 2014 Rendon back and we get players to start hitting again, just try and stay a bit healthier here. Then
listen,
I'm a bit worried about this year, to be honest.
I've been noticing a trend. You look at, what was it? Now we're at 2016, so that was 2012 that we put our name on the map? That we did.
It was 2012. It was 2012.
2012.
Because 2011 we went about 500. I remember.
Nobody really expected us to do that well. We were kind of just only thrown out there when there was time to be killed. But now you look at the year after, 2013, all the hype, because, we were a pretty well-rounded team.
Mm-hmm.
That year, we kind of tanked a little.
Yeah.
And then 2014, we made it to the playoffs, and nobody expected us to make it.
Yeah.
And then last year...
Well, we did pick up Max Scherzer.
We did pick up Max Scherzer, but the expectations weren't nearly as
high as they... Yeah, we ended up first seed again, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But, now you jump to this year, sometimes the club, to an extent, looks like it's in a bit of a disarray.
Yep.
And, people, might be counting us out a little bit. The whole Bryce Harper controversy, don't sell me short for, 6,000 years for U.S. national debt
Contract.
contract.
Give me the
Um,
China deal.
Yeah, I mean, hey, don't sell me short. Might as well, throw everything you got out there.
I do want to give Bryce Harper all the money, though, on the
I
planet.
mean, I don't know. I'm starting to. I like him as a player. I really do. But the personality. I mean, it's
I like
hard.
it.
It's hard. I mean, it's hard to dislike him because he's on your team. But I could totally see, if you're on the Mets or if you're on the Braves, just like utter resentment.
I think his attitude is very.
Showy.
No,
kind of.
I think he's very much like Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
Could you see
I
that?
can kind of see that. I don't know. I just feel like Aaron Rodgers is a little more humble than Bryce. Bryce, to an extent, is like kind of in his league of his own. By the way, have you found the song yet? Because I'm like ready for these shout-outs.
No, I haven't even prepared my own shout-outs, but
Oh, well,
I got a text from William 2 minutes after the last text. It's been 2 minutes since my most recent text, and I'm still waiting. But we've got Chris Russell, perhaps, going to the Dallas Stars.
Chris Russell to the Dallas Stars.
Yep.
Well,
Apparently, just pending a trade call.
I see. The Caps were rumored to Chris Russell. But
Well, too late.
yeah, from what I read, Calgary just wanted to get rid of him.
Really? I-
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the... Actually, while we wait, let's look at the standings now, and let's look at some of the... I was thinking about this. What are some Eastern Conference teams that you would not want to see in the playoffs? And I mean, here's the thing.
As in teams that I would not want to face?
Correct.
They're good?
Correct.
Well, let's
What are the
have a
teams that are
look
most
at the-
dangerous for the Capitals? I think you have to put in the Rangers. You have to put in
Of course.
Pittsburgh.
Because
Because Pittsburgh is one hot streak away from just running in the playoffs.
they're getting a lot of guys back. You're getting Malkin back. Actually, I think that's all they're getting back, so they're not getting a lot of guys back. But let's see. Let's look at the
Now,
Metropolitan Conference.
Now, I'm
Division.
looking at the entire East, to be honest.
Okay,
Playoff picture.
Columbus kind of scares me.
yeah, they're worrisome. I can't sleep at night because I think, oh God,
I have nightmares about John.
what if we had
Tortorella.
Columbus in the first round?
John Tortorella enters my dream every
And he yells at me.
night.
Um,
John Tortorella tells me I'm weak and I'm inferior.
John Tortellini tells me things about how terrible I am, and it makes me really upset.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. Florida, I think, is the team I would not want to face in the playoffs.
Here's why I'm not worried about Florida. Because they don't have too much playoff experience.
Right.
And it's not likely we'll see them in the first round. We'll
Why?
likely see them in the second round, if at all.
And
That would be after they put a lot into a playoff series. They might come out with some fire. They might even steal a game, one of the first two games from us. But I don't see them being too strong at home. I don't see them making any big dents.
I'm going to pull a Bryce Harper here, and I'm going to say don't sell them short. Because,
I'm honestly, from the Atlantic, I'm more worried about Tampa Bay.
I mean, if I had to pick a team in Florida that terrifies me the most, it would be Florida, which makes...
I think the entire state of Florida terrifies me in general, but the
Yes,
Tampa Bay
actually.
Lightning more so than the Florida Panthers on a hockey level terrify me.
I don't know. I think the Panthers...
It might just be me
a lot. I think
thinking
a lot
about
of people,
that previous playoff experience.
I think a lot of people are really kind of selling them short because
Well-
they're doing. I don't know. I think Jaromir Jagr is having a tremendous impact on that team.
But he can only go for so long, and he can't do everything in the playoffs.
That's actually false. He told me that he could go on forever.
Well, I
So-
think on that note, we'll send it over to shout-outs.
Awesome.
I might have to turn this down a bit. All right. Well, we'll do shout-outs at this level. So, what do you think? Why don't you start us off?
All right. Well, I tried you first, but whatever. How much time?
Go ahead.
How much time do I have?
You have infinite time.
That's it. Okay. Special shout out to Brooks Like. Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, I'll miss you too, Brooks.
Thank you for yours.
Make sure to speak up too, because I don't know
Okay.
how quiet or loud this is.
Many cheers for Brooks Like.
Hear, hear.
I'm gonna miss him a lot. Great guy. I'll always remember the story Pierre McGuire told.
About his time with the Brandon Wheat Kings.
Well, that and how he was in a full suit after he lost in
Montreal.
and he helped out that woman with a flat tire.
Yep.
In a full suit. Full suit.
Take a look right here, Joe. Full suit with the family, changing the flat tire. All right, how about me? So that's Brooks Like. Shout out to Brooks Like for sure. Okay. Shout out to John Oliver. # make Donald Trump again.
I didn't really finish also, but keep going.
Well, that's it. Just make Donald Trump again.
Okay.
DRUMPF. I think.
Big shout out to Alex Tangay,
Alex Tangay.
longest tenured
In National Hockey League history.
Yeah.
Since the birth of the National Hockey League, Alex Tangay has roamed the ice.
They call Yarmir Yager the Ageless Wonder. Alex Tangay is 7,000th wonder of the world.
Amazing. Alex Tangay, shout out to you, sir. Just me personally, shout out to the Game Grumps. I'm a big Game Grumps fan. Shout out to the Game Grumps.
Shout out to Raymond Bork.
Raymond Bork?
His two sons.
Oh, yeah. The Bork family. Shout out to the Borks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find that Muppet Chef Bork picture. I'm gonna put that up.
Mama Bork is the Nicholas Backstrom of the Bork family.
Yeah. Don't touch Papa. # Caps Roomies.
Yeah, that's right.
Shout out to Balloons. Helium, actually. Helium. Shout out to Helium.
Nice.
Because it heightens our spirits as well as our balloons.
Yeah. Shout out to Pete Chiarelli, who is just a horrible GM.
Who's the GM of?
He is the GM of the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh, boy.
He came from the Boston Bruins, and he traded away Dougie Hamilton, who was their only...
Yeah.
It's like their second best defenseman.
Yeah, he's good. Why?
And, I don't know who he got in return, and he also got Louis Erickson, which is like, golf clap good. That's pretty bad. So Pete Chiarelli, why don't you fire yourself?
The YouTube user that posted this TSN theme is named Go Edmonton.
Well, they're in for a rough.
All right, let's close out shout outs here. Let's do one more shout out each. I'm gonna shout out the Purdue basketball team for upsetting Maryland in Mackey. Big shout out to the boys in black and gold. Boiler up fans. Boiler up hockey fans.
Shout out to Barry Trotz's eyebrows that never stopped twitching. I think that's the best part.
Oh, shout out to phantom icing calls or lack of icing calls.
Shout out to the penalty box for gaining an old friend the other day. Brooks Orpik.
Ah, what a guy. Yeah, Brooks Orpik, long tenure. Shout out to Russian Machine Never Breaks.
Shout out to Ian Olin, Peter Hassett, all those guys.
You guys are great.
I love you.
They'll never respond to any of my tweets, though.
They'll never reply to any of my comments.
No, Ian Olin liked one of my comments once. It was the best day of my life.
I thought Ian Olin was, I don't know. Shout out to Alan May, too, for just being a total asshole to Ian Olin.
Whoa, I disagree. Alan May is a fine young man.
No, I think it's entertaining. And I think Ian
yeah.
Olin thinks it's entertaining, too.
All right, so is our last shout out really going to Alan May? No offense to Alan, but I mean, this has been a pretty big list.
How about smoking out Koken?
Smoke it out, Koken.
For
I can
Joe
deal with
Hansen and Andre Barakovsky.
From Marcus Johansson to Andre Barakovsky, we're
And not
saying
Cal-
so long from the Mad Mad podcast. I'm Matt Nogue.
And I'm Matt Cabrera.
And I am sad that we did this.